Good morning, afternoon, and evening, everyone, and welcome to today's Quantitative History Webinar. And I'm Sijie, and it's a pleasure for me to moderate today's session. And today we're very happy to have Dr. Ran with us to share his latest research on the Chinese ceramics in Archaic Globalisation. And Dr. Ran Zhang. And Dr. Zhang is an assistant professor in the Department of Archaeology at Durham University, and his work employs chronological and quantitative statistical techniques to analyze archaeological materials. And we look forward to listening to gaining new insights from his research today on the role of Chinese ceramics. And we are also delighted to have Professor Bing Yang as our discussant today. And Professor Yang is a professor of history at City University of Hong Kong, and his research spans Chinese history, global history, and the history of science, technology, and medicine. And we believe that with his expertise, we will also have he will also offer valuable perspectives on today's topic. So as for today's format, Dr. Zhang will first give a 1-hour presentation, followed by Professor Yang's 15-minute discussion. And after that, we will then open the floor to the audience for a Q&A session. So for everyone in the webinar, please feel free to just submit your question in the Q&A box, and we will relay them to Dr. Zhang in the Q&A session to address these questions. Okay, so without further ado, let's welcome Dr. Zhang. And Dr. Zhang, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Professor Hu Sijie, and also many thanks for Professor Yang's we'll have comments. And I hope that everyone, you can hear me. And I want to send my special thanks to Professor Chen Zhiwu and also the Hong Kong University Business School and Center for Quantitative History. And it's my great honor to have this opportunity to talk about my study in archaeology about the Chinese ceramic trade in the Indian Ocean. And I want to present this topic within a framework of these archaic globalization. And so I would like to start with a very short and general introduction. It's about the ancient economy, archaeology, and quantitative study. And I think it's really true that in the ancient economic study, history is the most important part in our understanding, whatever in China or in the worldwide. But actually, we find out when we see the details, for example, the merchants' behaviors in the past, and also about like the trading modes, competition in the market. Sometimes we don't have a very strong historical record, especially after 1600. When European into the Indian Ocean with the journals and archives recorded by the explorers or the merchants and the sailors. So we believe that in a certain time, for example, in the medieval period or in the in China, we call this historical period. We believe the documents in the early trade activities are thin, and the exist in many periods, in many places. And so that's why we think archaeology and archaeological finds can really tell some more information, and we can really complete or give more and a bit different understanding from archaeological records to support or to against, or sometimes to like in many cases that we like to collaborate with the historical studies. But clearly, archaeological records have their own problems. Like archaeological record is problematic and is weakened by the major region variations in the methods and research qualities. So sometimes we don't really believe in the publications by archaeologists because they don't have all expertise in terms of study of, for example, Western archaeologists. They don't have a very strong understanding about Chinese materials unearthed from the Indian Ocean or Europe. So this is why that we need general a pattern and an understanding about the materials, and we want to use archaeological material to support and calibrate, and also against historical study. And why Chinese ceramics? I think we have one paper published by Professor Chen Zhiwu just recently, and he's talking about the China and Arab trade in the medieval period in the Indian Ocean. And he mentioned about this from an ancient historical review and perspective, and actually talk about this. The Chinese ceramics are really one of the important commodities in the study. And here we can see that probably there are some more reasons that we want to use archaeological materials like Chinese ceramics, because we know that like ceramics in the past is not a really ideal goods for merchants. They are heavy, they are fragile, for example, and they are sometimes, in many cases, you find out the potteries, they are not valuable, and they just locally produced and locally consumed. So what we can see about Chinese ceramics, they are valuable in the long distance trade, and they massively produced in China and massively traded in the whole Indian Ocean, probably in the like global size. So yeah, and also they have a very precise dating in many cases, commonly found in large quantities on the archaeological sites from Japan to Africa and to Europe in the later period. And they consistently trade in the past for 1,000 years. And they have different ranges of the consumers from the emperors in China to the very humble and deep roots of people in the Indian Ocean. So we believe Chinese ceramics is a really good material and for the study. And here we have probably, yes, we just want to I would just want to quickly talk about once we have the material and we have the vision, so what should we do? And we believe a quantitative study and it's really important even for archaeology. We know that archaeology is not purely based on the social science. Yes, we have science, social science, but in many cases in archaeology, we use narrative studies, descriptions, or we use comparison studies. But here I would like to emphasize about the importance of quantitative study because archaeological materials, they do not speak themselves. And the archaeologists must determine what aspect to study based on our research aim. And a quantitative study actually is really essential for archaeologists and to see the materials and the results behind the materials. And without them, that we cannot really see the general understanding about the to answer our questions. And in many cases, without quantitative study, we believe the study or understanding probably they have a flawed or they have like a misleading understanding. And also for the, we'd like to say that a quantitative study is also not a magic. So we hope that we can have a good balance between quantitative and qualitative study and get a comprehensive understanding. For example, I think last year, the economic Nobel Prize is given like to a study that is actually not really a quantitative study. It's about institutional discussion about why nations failed. So in this case, that we can see qualitative study is still very important. But yes, we want to see a combination of two approaches. So here we can see, I would like to call this statistical study sentence here. It's easy to lie with statistics, but it has to tell the truth without it. So I believe that it's really important for us to understand properly about the past by using archaeological materials and see the trading patterns and movements of goods by our quantitative research. So in my study today in this lecture, I will talk both of them. So some of them we have qualitative studies, but also at the same time, I want to introduce my quantitative studies on the ceramic trade. And here, the first part I would like to talk about a little bit about the Archaic Globalisation. And because we believe the trade of Chinese ceramics or the role of China in the ancient economic trade, maritime trade, should be based on a general understanding of the globalization. And we now know that, like for example, at Durham University, we believe decolonization and globalization they are very important in the study of archaeology, probably for other social sciences in many parts of the world right now. So yes, we want to talk about this globalization a little bit in archaeology. And I'd like to start with this Golden Child. He's a very important and famous and influential archaeologist. And we believe that we can see the world structure nowadays is based on the civilization of human beings. We can see globalization is one page of this civilization we established in the past many thousand years. So Child, he as probably the first archaeologist properly to define civilization. He said that the first cities had 10 special features that made different from the older villages or villages that existed at the same time. So he used the archaeological finds like buildings, tools, like potteries, and any other archaeological finds to define them. So we can see that when we want to see a civilization, we need to see large population, we need to see the specialization, surplus from the production, monuments like pyramids or like the Great Wall in China. We want to see different social groups. We have kings, we have normal people, we have laborers, and also we have knowledge and science. Writing is really important, and also art and trade, and eventually we have the ideology like a religion or common identity in the cities. So these are the features that probably we can use. And Golden Child said it's not necessary to have all of them, but we need to remember that we need to keep them in mind that when we see the civilization, we probably need to see the features like those things. And then we think about the trade, long-distance trade, is really need organization of people in the past. With long-distance trade, we need writing and records, and we need the specialization of production, traders, and special places for the market. And also, of course, we have surpluses. So we believe that long-distance trade and early globalization is actually based on the civilization of the human beings. And then we can see that this is the pattern about the early civilizations in the East, from China to India and to Mesopotamia and Egypt. And we believe that the left three, from Egypt to Indus, that they've been strongly connected. And we know that China later on actually got into contact with the other civilization together. So here I want to talk about like here we can see this India and this Mesopotamia. So in between actually this trade, we can see the connections between India and the Near East connected by this middle point actually by sea. So here we can see that this is one of the archaeological finds from the UAE. So this is United Arab Emirates here, and this archaeological and also this UNESCO site with the Shimo tombs. It's a Bronze Age tomb, and you can see this round and stone-built tomb structure. And this tradition of tomb building actually is really local. You can now see the same structure in Mesopotamia or another from from India. So this really local tradition. But actually from the burials, like on the right side, you see potteries, you see weapons, you see stonewares, and they have a very strong impact from in both India and Mesopotamia. It means that actually the local tradition in the burial practices, they have the cultures came from the other places. And it is demonstrated like this, probably the early version of the movement of knowledge, technology, goods, and probably resources. So we believe probably for archaeologists, we believe this type of early globalization, even it's a short distance today. For us, that is not for modern society or modern world. Clearly, this is not a long distance trade, but still we can see this the map to show about the early version of the globalized network from China to Europe and Africa. We call this old world. And here we can see this the trading system, the Indo-Roman trade access and Silk Road. So China in the east from Chang'an or Luoyang had been connected within this network to the Mediterranean Sea or to the North Africa. And here we can see at the early stage, land route was the very in the prosperous, and so this must be the Silk Road based trade network, and we believe that on this network there are a lot of barriers, like for example the taxes. The merchants, they have to pass the official checking and also taxes, and they have to pay a lot of money extra and with this long distance trade. So it's not highly efficient for the merchants in this long distance trade. And then we can see there's a movement around from 30 BC that we can see that there's a trend about this movement from the land to the maritime network. So this is the early stage about the Indian Ocean trade, and clearly China has not yet been involved in this maritime trade at that time. But you can see actually from the Mediterranean Sea to the Red Sea and the Western Indian Ocean have been started and established this network at that stage. And then we know that we have Sasanian civilizations, and we have this so the Arab world. So this the Indian Ocean trade has been established by, or has been further developed by this Abbasid Caliphate. So we can see that they get agricultural expansion, city expansion, waterway trade, maritime commerce, and long distance trade is based on this the Gulf. And we know that the Islamic Empire actually quite large at that time in the east, in the western part of the Eurasia. So basically, they're covering the territory from the South Europe to Africa, and then the whole Saudi Arabia, and then the Gulf, Iran, and Iraq. So this is one of the really important powers at the time, and really controlled the trade, maritime trade in the Western Indian Ocean, Red Sea, and Mediterranean Sea. But at the same time, Tang China, played another really superpower at that time in the East. And we can see that two large powers at that time, still, again, that China now still is a large power in the world, very long time existed. But we can see this, the early stage of Tang China and the Islamic world has been connected and engaged together. And we believe that this is the world system. We can see the trade basically based on these large circles and within this long distance and direct trade. And we have archaeological evidence to support that. And later on, about this Chinese Song and Yuan dynasty, or even early Ming, we can see that is basically in the dating is around like 10th to the 16th century before Europeans' entry. And the whole Indian Ocean trade has been divided into three sub-zones. And we can think about like the trade modes, because the merchants came from the Gulf, and they need to spend a long time to get China. And also they have to stop in the middle points. Even those points were not their destinations or were not their trading places, but they have to stop in the middle and spend quite a long time to catch the monsoon and also catch South China, learn Chinese language, trade with local people, and they have to spend many time, many years in China and with a return. So probably for one merchant from the Gulf to China for one trade, they need, we don't know, but probably more than 5 years, at least 2 years or 3 years. and also they have a high risk from the sea. And we know that Belitung shipwreck is one of the trade shipwreck sunk near Singapore or Malaysia. About Indonesia, and then there's a high risk. You can see the whole shape sunk. So even in the 14th century, we see in the history, merchants they said that we have all the time reports to say that the travelers to China and the not get back return. So long distance trade gets some problems. So merchants, they are very wise. So they divided this long distance trade into smaller zones, and the sailors and merchants probably they just move in between. And for example, from South China to Southeast Asia, or from the Red Sea to India. So shorter distance and regular and routine trade routes can really increase the efficiency and also the safety for this long distance trade network. And we can see this changing of trade modes and happened, and also this by the historical study. And then we know this Ablugot with her study. She said that this is a world system in the 13th century world, and the whole world had been connected together. And we can see this quite clear sub world system, smaller zones, and they developed separately, but they also have been connected very well. So this we probably we want to talk about is a very basic and general background about the Archaic globalization. And we can see this based on the civilization of human beings, we need each other, and we need the long distance trade, and we need efficiency, we need low risk of the trade, and developed to these medieval period and even to the modern period with the world economic and political structures nowadays. Archaeologically, we can support this movement. Probably sometimes we have some detailed information, sometimes we have massive information about this network understanding. So we are going to see the archaeological evidence and talk about like what can we find. So globalization is very difficult to be defined. But at least we can see some elements like movements of materials or commodities, movements of knowledge, like culture and religion, and massive trade and capital, money. And then eventually, yes, we can see the movements and the immigration of people. So archaeologically, we can show all those aspects by our archaeological finds. Like commodities or materials, like coins, is very obviously one of the types of the really important and popular item in archaeology. Sometimes it's not massive, but still they tell us about like trade and economic exchange. It's really direct evidence to show that they have this economic activity exchange in the past. Glasses is one of the materials, really shiny and not famed in China, because in China we don't have a very strong expertise in terms of glasses making, but Chinese people we are fancy with the glasses materials. Like this one of the Warring State period imports, from the Deng Houyi tomb in Wuhan, and displayed now in the National Museum, in the Wuhan Provincial Museum, and we believe that is the imports from the West Asia. Glasses can be also find out from, for example, in Guangxi province in China. So those things, we believe they are the imported materials from the sea to China. And also with the our archaeological collaboration with the Palace Museum in Beijing, that we have this excavation in the site. I will talk about this site, but in the United Arab Emirates in Ras Al-Khaimah. And we can see we find out the different types of bangles, glass bangles. So they have plan, they have twisted, they have different types of decorations, and we believe if with scientific archaeology, we can really identify and find out the original making places. and the dating of them. And we can see another page of these long distance trade from Egypt or India within this Arab world about the glasses trade. Jewelries, yeah, in the past, yes, for example, in the 901 shipwreck, we have seen the rings without gems, but yes, they are type of jewelries. And here we can see the discovery from the Liangzhuang king's mausoleum in the Ming dynasty, and especially this gold ingot with the inscription of Zheng He's voyages, and claim that Zheng He got those like luxury items from the West Sea, and the West Sea in this historical record, Xiyang, so in Chinese. So West Sea must be the area of the Gulf or the Hormuz Kingdom in the past. And like for example, this the fabrics and Sasanian fabrics and Chinese fabrics, we can see the similarity. It's showing about like this design with the bees around and with the animal creature inside. So the same to the Chinese design, and technically we believe this exchange as well. So Chinese fabric, they imitated or they learned this weaving method of fabrics from the Sasanian brocade. And also the, for example, they have this art exchange, and we can see this fashion exchange on the fabrics. Material, like pottery materials, very often that you can find out from archaeology, massively traded in the past. So we will talk about the ceramic trade in a minute, so we just go very quickly about that. But Chinese ceramics, Sasanian potteries from Japan, this is the examples of Near East made pottery unearthed from Japan, but also at the same time you can see the finds from South China as well. And for example, a bit short distance, but still that we can see this indirect pottery and with its distribution, not only in India but also in the Gulf. Roman pottery from India also is one type of the material and the commodity trade in the past. And some of the Roman potteries, they played the roles like containers for perfume, or for wine, or for olive oil. So they are very important in the Indian Ocean trade. Probably, if you remember, we talk about the Indo-Roman axis. This is one of the evidence archaeologically. And yeah, archaeologically, it's really rare to find out this organic material, like perfumes or frankincense, for example. But we know that been used vastly in China and Roma, the Arab frankincense, like from Oman, that they have been vastly used in the worldwide. And based on the commodities like materials and trade of goods, probably we can see more like a knowledge exchange. We just get one example about the fabrics, but here we can see it's on Chinese ceramics. So this porcelain from Longchuan, grain glazed, really beautiful jade-like materials, and produced in this, basically it's a late 14th century to the 15th century. And you can see that the manufacturing technique feature here, it got unglazed ring here on the base for the making in the kilns. So this especially, actually, it's not really often you can see this technique from Chinese ceramics, but it's really featured in the Longchuan ceramics. Really unique identity point. And on the right, you can see this imitation of the Longchuan celadon, but actually is made in the Islamic world, probably Egyptian made. You can see that they not only copy the appearance or the glaze of it, the shape of the Chinese celadon, they even copied these features like this anglazed ring. You can also see from this Islamic pottery. It's not really in the Islamic making styles, but you can see this how precisely they imitating Chinese materials at that time in the around 14th or 15th century. And also can see that the Islamic probably Turkish or Iranian blood and white porcelain. So this landscape style looks, you can see the pattern is really like Chinese decoration, but more importantly, you can see that they got the marks. So marks is really important for European buyers. They say that European buyers, like from Holland, they say if you want to buy the real Chinese ceramics, remember that they have marks, like 4 Chinese characters. But here, seems like the Iranian or the Turkish Islamic potters, they knew this knowledge as well. They don't know how to write Chinese, but they know that European merchants must have no chance to read Chinese. So they just write something meaningless and just nothing. Actually, if you read Chinese, you can directly tell there's nothing. But just in the imitation of Chinese marks and characters, and in the market. Probably we can see this kind of a knowledge exchange or idea exchange, and also about the competitions in the market. And also, more importantly, we can see the cultural and religion exchange. Like in Pompeii, you'll find out this very famous India god or goddess statues has been unearthed from Roma or even from Egypt, for example. So it's telling about the exchange of ideas in the past. In China, yes, you see the imports of Buddhism or then into Japan then. So you can see this also about the knowledge. With this globalization, we can see the knowledge exchange and cultural and religion exchange. Like in this one is from Bahrain, and is one of the recent archaeological project there, and you can see they have these ivory crosses from the site. Actually, the site is a church and not a mosque. And they find archaeologists, they also find out pig and the pig bones, and telling that the local communities, they are clearly not not eating halal food. They are having this very clear Christianity behaviors and traditions. So it's, you can see this spread of religion as well. And like nativity, this really beautiful oil painting and showing about this 3 wise men and offering the goods to the baby Jesus. And here we can see they are offering the like a gold and incense, for example. And the holders for the gold here is especially interesting, is that these Chinese blood and white. And it's really showing about this Chinese ceramics got in the about this late 15th century in Europe, got a very special social status and also functions. They believe this a special item used by the holy persons or by the gods, for example. And eventually we want to see people like Marco Polo, and we call this Marco Polo jar. Probably it's not 100% sure, but still you can see this the people. You can find out the earliest people from Europe to China in the history, also by supported by archaeological evidence, and also can see the earliest Chinese in the UK. For example, this Shen Fuzong, he came from China and learned Latin in China and with the missionaries then, and he came to the UK. He met with the King James II, visited the Oxford University, and still in Oxford University, you can see one of the maps, and it's about Chinese maps with the Chinese characters of labels about places like capitals of China, cities of China. And Shen Fuzong, he used Latin and pencil, marked the names in Latin, like about the locations of Chinese cities. Still, you can see the map, you can see his writing on the map. It's housed now in the Bodleian Library in Oxford. So all the elements that we can find out with the movements from the goods to people. And now we want to just quickly talk about the Chinese trade in this long distance globalization background. So here we have this list of trading list, like it's from South Iran, basically about 10th century by the historical records. And we can see on the list you have food stuff, you have textiles, you have leather and other things. And you can see all of them actually they are very organic or not very easy to be preserved in archaeological context. And here you can only see this fish and probably this metalwares. They can be archaeological find, often preserved in archaeology, but rest of them, they just gone in the past. So this page means that in the trade, we need to remember that actually ceramics is even not on this list. Chinese ceramics or potteries, they are not on this list. Means that in the trade, actually we have a very enriched list, a good diversity of the trade items. Because in archaeology, we cannot have all of them. And historically, we don't know how much goods have been traded. So this is a bit tricky for us to really understand the past trade. So probably pottery and Chinese ceramics, archaeologically, is the only chance that we can see the trade patterns in the past by this quantified study and long-distance trade. And here we have this Seth Priestman's work about the Western Indian Ocean pottery exchange, and he quantified the sites like the black dots, and all the pottery has been studied. He's a really important and famous archaeologist in terms of the Islamic pottery study. And with his study, he used the quantified study, and he believed that we have a local, a regional, and exotic trade in the past. Because in the Indian Ocean and long-distance trade, archaeologists or historians, we just focus on the very famous luxury items. We forgot about the common things, like on the list. Many things, they are not valuable. But actually, the majority of the trade, by Seth Priestman's study, he believed that the majority in this long-distance trade or regional trade, actually they are mainly based on the low quality and non-valuable items for the regular trade. And also, yes, within this we can see valuable items like Chinese ceramic imports. Here is one of the example. Is an ongoing project with Seth Priestman and myself that we quantified the pottery discoveries from a site in Ras al-Khaimah, and we can see the local potteries, they're taking a really large number, and the Chinese and European imports get a very tiny amount in this long-distance trade. So we probably can tell that, yes, Chinese ceramics are the only chance to see the long-distance trade, but remember, they are not all of them, even they are taking a very small number. And we have different types of methodologies to approach the study in the Indian Ocean exchange, but we believe quantitative studies are really valuable. But otherwise, we have anthropological understanding, historical interpretations, archaeological excavation is the key for archaeology studies, and art history studies. And this is actually our data collection about the Chinese kilns and also about the Chinese trade ceramics. So here you can see the right point means that the data we collected in the Western Indian Ocean, and they are massively showing about the whole the density of Chinese ceramic finds from the Indian Ocean, or especially for the Western Indian Ocean. And in terms of the manufacturing, the industrial patterns of Chinese ceramics, we can see that by the kiln numbers, we can see that there's different stages of the development and then decline. And clearly we can see that Tang China is got the first step of the massive development. And if we see the art history, we can see the technical improvement and also quality improvement of Chinese ceramics occurred in the Tang Dynasty. And then soon we can see that we reached the peak. Actually, if you see this pattern is a bit different from the Chinese ceramic trade, we will show very soon. And so the peak for kilns actually is around Song Dynasty, but for the long distance trade, it's a bit later than this one. We have not yet got a chance to give a better explanation about this, but I believe in the future, if we have any collaboration with Professor Chen or with Dr. Li, that probably we can see more and study more about why we can see this a bit not really perfectly matched patterns, but still it's really valuable. And here we can just take one example. This Yue kilns. So if anyone you have been to any chance to see this archaeological kilns, you can see this one lake, and surround the lake, you get about over 200 kiln sites, and around the bank you can see that it is really difficult to see any nature stones. So you can see that they have just tools and like the tools for ceramic manufacturing. Like this Professor Derek Kennett in Chicago, he's my supervisor. We visited this place together, and you can see I use him as the scale, and you can see the site that's been excavated, and you can see the deposits of the waste from the kiln site. It's about 5 meters deep. It's impossible for archaeologists to do the work like that. It's really excellent. And you can just very randomly, you give a picture, you can see the deposits from the industry, and showing the industry with a very massive scale in terms of production. Again, for Longchuan kilns, so in South China, and it's not really far from Shanghai here, but you can see this the city center of Longchuan, and based on this Longchuan River and the old river linked to this Wenzhou, is one of the most important or very famous trading posts at that time in the Yuan dynasty. And from Song to Ming dynasty, you can see local archaeologists, they find out over 400 archaeological kiln sites producing Longchuan celadon. And they have different groups in the east and the south. And for the trade of Chinese ceramic, you can see with the massive production and labor organization, and we can see Chinese product has been vastly distributed in the whole Western Indian Ocean, even to Spain. And there's one of a research based on the classification of workshops from the kiln sites. And the red dots or red part means the specialized workshops, means that they have specialized functions and specialized organization on the site. But green means that everything is mixed with the production stages, and yellow means mixed types. So we can see the specialization of Chinese ceramic production increased, and also actually moving to South China like that. So this is the Chinese ceramic finds from the Western Indian Ocean, and we can see they have been, if we use this seriation and classification to define them, we can see there's a consistent trade of them in the past 1,000 years. And also for the production of the Chinese ceramics, for the trade ceramics, we can see that in the early stage, they scattered in the North and South China, and then moving on to South China. I think this result is really paralleled, have been also emphasized by Professor Chen Zhiwu in his previous lecture. And he mentioned about this peak of the population in South China, but you can see in the trade ceramic industry, we have the same pattern, very paralleled evidence. And we can see this from Tang China, the switch from the land to the sea trade by the distribution of Sasanian coins inside of China. You can see around this pre-Tang period, land rules was still in this dominant, like a very strong. But after that, you can see at the same time, you can see sea route actually parallel developed, but not that important. And after about after the Tang Dynasty, with the problems about the Silk Road has been cut by the Tibetan, but also by the inside conflicts like An-Lushan rebellion inside of China. The economic center start to move to South China, and the maritime trade of China and development of South China occurred at that time. So this is the basic background about the Chinese involvement into the sea from Tang China. I believe Professor Chen, he got the same idea by his recent archaeological study, and by his recent historical study. And here we are going to talk about very quickly about the Hormuz Kingdom. This place has been visited by Zheng He's voyages, by many merchants in the worldwide, but also by eventually by the European invasions. Not very good, but Yes, so this is a very important place. So we want to talk about not only about the quantified study and the results, we want to also show the contextual understanding of Chinese ceramic finds from this site. Exactly, it's a Ras al-Khaimah. If you remember, the glass bangles came from this place. So this is a place of this Hormuz Kingdom and also the Hormuz Island. It's a connection of the whole Indian Ocean and the Levant and the even in the East and North Europe, even from Russia. So it's a very important connection point from the land to the sea. It's a long distance trade in this early globalization. And archaeologically, and also historically, we can see there are two kingdoms. One is called the Old Kingdoms, and this Mongolian invasion. So they just flee to this island, and this we call this the New Hormuz Kingdom. And this is a city without hinterland because on this land is really, really dry and there's nothing production. So they have to buy waters, buy food from other places. But they are taking a very strategic place in this long distance trade. They can collect tax. They can doing a lot of economic activities, like mint coins, for example, and they can control the trading network in this whole area. And this is a very important connection from land to the sea. So they are very rich. They can buy everything they like Dubai today, I think. They produce nothing, but they have a very strong economic activities, investments, for example. And here we can see this map showing the Hormuz Island. Only this tiny top and this tiny point here is very good and suitable for the residential zones. But the rest of the land actually not very ideal for living. So we know that in the Indian Ocean, it's really important to think about this environment. I think for our archaeologists, we believe and we know that in the summertime, it's really difficult to have archaeological missions in the Arab world, like in Saudi Arabia or like in Qatar or in the UAE. And it's really, really hot and it's not suitable for people's living. But oasis is really important for the local people in past many thousand years. So once in the summertime, once you get into this oasis, you can get the temperature from about 40 or 50 degree down to about, like, for example, just 27 or 30 degree, much better. And you can see that in between of the plum trees, you get the growth of crops. So you can see different different crops has been grown nowadays, like to show this spaces. It can be used. So once the plum trees, they get leaves, they get the shelter for you, and then you can get different types of activities and living inside of the oases. So oases seems like very important, but actually they are not naturally developed. So they buy slaves from Africa and from North Europe, and they call them like white slave, and then we can see that they grow these artificial oases, and really important for local living. Beside the oases, you have castles, you have towns. So we can see this a picture about the oil age, discovered oil in the Arab world, and about 1968, and not very early, right? And you can see that this is the village, pretty much quite the same in the past many centuries. The villages in the, like, for example, UAE, they probably have the same environment, and looks like probably this is the place for the Chinese ceramic trade and uses on the land. And it's really, I think it's a paradox, like seems like for example, Chinese imperial porcelain, very valuable, only available for the emperor in China, only available in the palaces, but they've been used on the land like this. Seems like not really relevant to the environment and economic background, right? But actually, the villages like this one, or town like this one, they have a really large number of Chinese ceramic discoveries from the site, from the Ras al-Khaimah. So this the Ras al-Khaimah in the UAE, and the red dots, they are the archaeological sites, and with the Palace Museum and the local government, we are working on those sites. So in the UAE, we call this site Julfar, and so in Ras al-Khaimah, and it's been for a long time been studied by Iraqi or UK teams, by Japanese, Germany, like French teams, German teams, and US teams, UK teams. And nowadays, like we are working on this with the Palace Museum from Chinese teams. And so this location. So if you remember this, the territory of Hormuz Kingdom, and then you get this Ras al-Khaimah, and then this the location of Julfar there. And from the archaeological understanding, we can see the occurrence of Chinese ceramics on the site actually is paralleled with the expansion of the population, settlements, agriculture, and economy. And although Julfar is not recorded in history, we find out them in archaeologically very important. So here we can see this quantified data about the settlement numbers from prehistory, Bronze Age, to the Islamic period and post-Islamic period. And we can see this basically a boom about 14th to 15th century, 16th century, with the local settlements. If you remember, we say that large population is one of the features by Golden Child. Yes, you see the expansion of population and by numbers of settlements. And also we can see that there's agricultural expansion. So they built this farming field on the hill. It's really difficult for them like to look after the farming field by climbing up the mountains, but still they would like to do that because the Hormuz Kingdom, as the capital, they produce nothing. They need to buy the food from surrounding area. So this actually stimulated the local agricultural expansion, but also with the population expansion. And we can see urbanization on the site. It's by Japanese team. They are digging. They dug out the tongue, and you can see that this the strait you can find out, and then declined. At the same time, the UK team they find out a mosque, and you can see at the parallel period to this tongue, they have expansion of the spaces of the space in the mosque, and showing that not only this place has been urbanized, but with a larger population, they need more spaces for prey in the mosques. Coins mint in Hormuz Island but used locally. And normally we know in the Indian Ocean they don't have a coin. They just trade goods by goods, and they just sometimes they use kauri, like the shell currency, like in the Maldives or in East Africa, like Zhang of voyages, he mentioned about that. And yes, so this is the very clear signal to see the economic expansion or development in Ras al-Khaimah with this like a coin and metal coinage on the site. They have silver, they have metal, they have gold coins. And local manufacturing industry. If you remember, we talked about a little bit about like the pottery. So like this one type of the local pottery. So you can see the kiln in comparison with the Chinese kiln. This kiln is really in smaller scale and really primary in terms of the manufacturing method. And also you can see the quality of the products. Were really low and rough. Even we just joke, but the quality is not even better than Chinese prehistory pottery. If we have some archaeologists from early stage of China, probably you can see the pottery quality not very ideal, right? But even like that, it's a daily use for people. So locally produced and consumed largely, but they have been traded in this regional, like in the Gulf, but also even to Kenya, in the East Africa, but probably other places they reported more than that. So you can see this local manufacturing industry, but with quite wide consumers in the Western Indian Ocean. But most importantly, that we find out a huge number of Chinese ceramics, and as we said that probably this is the place not really relevant to the luxury Chinese materials, but yes, they have been produced, they have been traded and consumed on the site largely. And we can see there's three types of potteries have been found out from the Ras al-Khaimah, from Julfar. And the first one we call this Iranian-made sgraffiato wares is exactly to this type. You can see in the circulation, but it's a quantified study. In the circulation, in the early stage of the Julfar site, you can see that they have so this kush, but from another very near site, and they circulated on the site. And then with the introduction of Chinese celadon, Longchuan celadon, exactly from the side. So you can see with the introduction of Longchuan, the sgraffiato disappeared immediately, and this just a sharp decline. And probably is telling about the how strong of Chinese goods into this local community in the circulation. And once this very good price and good quality, probably the best quality at that time of Chinese ceramic imports into the market, the earlier version of tablewares disappeared immediately. And then we can see then from about the 14th century, with the introduction of Chinese blue and white, you can see the competition and the shift of the two types of commodities on the side changed, but very gently. So Longchuan declined slowly, and with the quite also slow and increased introduction of blue and white. So you can see this the different types of computation of the Chinese ceramic consumption on the site, like Ras al-Khaimah. Probably in many other sites, you can see the same pattern or different pattern. So we don't have time to introduce all of them, and also we need to study them in the future, like to get a better understanding about the contextual uses for the uses of Chinese ceramics. Yeah, and so in conclusion, I think the time is almost there. Yeah, so in conclusion, we can see this the result about the Chinese ceramic trade in the Western Indian Ocean with the general trend. And basically, we can see this beginning really great. I think similar data has been introduced by Professor Chen Zhiwu by his previous discussion. So we won't really repeat it. But again, that we want to tell probably the same, just a repeat. And the boom about the late 14th century, we see this peak of Chinese ceramic trade, mainly driven by the Longchuan celadon. And then sharp decline to show the Ming C-band in the early stage. But here is a bit different from the C-band, because before we think there's a gap. But actually, by our recent study, we don't think it's a gap. It's a decline, but it's not just disappeared. Even with C-band, that the government, they have some policy, but actually not perfectly being implemented by the for example, by the merchants. So smuggling trade still there. And then we can see with European merchants came into the whole Indian Ocean and to China, the trade then come back. And probably the second peak is also very important and large. So we can see basically three peaks of Chinese ceramic trade in the Indian Ocean from the Tang, mid-Tang to Yuan and late Ming and Qing dynasties. And here we can see the map showing the computations of the celadon and the blue and white Chinese porcelain. So red dots means grain glazed wares, and the blue dots means the blue and white Chinese commodities, and other circles means other types of Chinese ceramics. And we can see the shifting patterns about different commodities, really similar to the pattern we just talked about in Ras al-Khaimah, but it's quite a global wide vision about this computations of commodities imports from China. So generally to say that we don't really talk about all of them, but the key thing is that we believe green glazed wares, they are very popular. Blue and white, they are popular. Especially white porcelain, they are not taking a very large portion, but they are consistently traded in the past. But very clearly, we see that not all types of Chinese ceramic existed for a long time or achieve a widespread distribution. So this means that even Chinese ceramics, they are very valuable. They are in high quality at that time, but not all of them, they are successful in the market. Only probably a few types of them, like celadon and green, blue and white porcelain, they are valuable. So this probably can tell us about some details, why some of them, they are very successful, but not for others. Probably we can see this taste from the market, the fashion, this imitations and technological computations probably. So yeah, I believe there are more stories that we can talk about. So yeah, I promise this is the last page that we want to say that yes, in China you can see a very organized production for Chinese trade ceramics. It's really important and the foundation for this massive trade of Chinese ceramics in this globalized maritime trade. And we see this the trade networks, for example, the merchants actually not mainly by Chinese, is largely by Arab merchants and then European merchants. So we can see the trading networks complicated. A lot of recent works has been done, like for example by Professor Xu Wenpeng from Xiamen University. He gave us a very detailed information about the trade, organization of networks, even from the kiln site to the port. And also we see market adoption. That seems like black and white, why they are so strong at the last stage, because they are beautiful, they are really suitable for the Islamic and European taste. Probably it's one of the reasons that we need to remember in archaeology for the study of ceramics. Like art history is still important, and market adoption should be the one of the key things we need to study. And then lastly, we believe Chinese ceramics in the past 1,000 years, I think it's true that we can call them globalized commodities. It's produced in China and consistently trade into the Indian Ocean. But just keep in mind that they are just one tap of the commodities on the trading list. And yeah, sorry, this is the last one. Yeah, so I just want to think just a conclusion that I think globalization is really important, whatever for now or in the past, because we enjoying the results from globalization at the moment. Like I have this meeting presentation. I'm in the UK, but everyone probably come from different parts of the world. So this is really a good example for globalization. And then we believe this, yeah, we need to keep this globalization as saying like this sentence is really important for the human past. And this the references about this presentation. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Zhang, and it's really a great presentation and very insightful. So before we move to our discussion, I'd like to please allow me to remind our audience again, if you have any questions, please feel free to drop your question in the Q&A box. Okay, so now let's welcome Professor Bing Yang from City University of Hong Kong. And Professor Yang, over to you.
Hi, Professor Hu and Professor Zhang and the dear audience. Can you hear me?
Yes, yeah. Yes, very clearly.
Excellent. Well, I must congratulate Professor Zhang's wonderful talk. His talk is based on a solid research on early globalization illustrated by Chinese ceramics discovered in the western part of the Indian Ocean world. And from the 9th century to the 19th century is a long delay. So it's a very difficult project, and he has done very well. So inspired as a conventional historian. He also discussed the two cases. One is Hormuz Kingdom, and the other is Julfar in al-Khaimah. So both of them were located in the Persian Gulf, and that illustrated the Persian Gulf as a destination of Chinese ceramics and probably other goods, but also served as a transit center for further trade to, for example, Near East and beyond the Middle East, Near East, and beyond probably Europe. In addition to his quantitative research methods, I found many merits. For example, the shift from land to sea. He adopted a maritime approach, and I think indeed it's a much overdue indeed in our historic studies of Asia or Sino-foreign interactions or maritime Asia. And he also picked up, very interesting in the western part of Indian Ocean. I love it because, I'm one of the few Chinese historians who focus on the Sino-Indian Ocean interactions, particularly the western part of the Indian Ocean world. He also has provided a lot of details, rich information. For example, when I saw the photo of the tree that produced frankincense, Ruxiang, I was so happy because that photo exactly matched with what a Song scholar, probably in the 12th century, described about the Ruxiang Shu in Arabic Peninsula. So the two, the Chinese texture fits with the modern photo perfectly. Again, as a historian, I would like to discuss his research in three aspects: time, space, and materials. So let's start by time or periodization. Professor Zhang discussed from 9th century, and I love it, 9th century. Why 9th century? Because in the shipwreck discovered in South China Sea, the two earliest shipwreck discovered in South China Sea were around 9th century. Professor Zhang mentioned the Beijing ship discovered in 1998 near Indonesia. And it's a Western Indian Ocean style, it's a stitched ship, especially produced, exclusively produced in Western Indian Ocean world. So having said that, we could assume that this ship discovered in Indonesia, probably its destination was the Arabic Peninsula or the Persian Gulf. And it's dated around the 830s or 840s, so in the beginning of the 9th century. And recently we had another stitched shipwreck discovered in the Siam Gulf, and it's dated probably a bit earlier than 9th century, probably around 775 CE. So both of them, both of the earliest shipwreck discovered in South China Sea actually probably originated from western part of the Indian Ocean. And how wonderful indeed. I think when talking about the early globalization of maritime trade, Jeff Wade mentioned that probably 8th century or 9th century was a very important time moment. And recently, Professor Hansen at Yale, actually, in her publication, he mentioned that the year 1000, so the beginning of the 11th century, is the time when globalization began. I think Professor Zhang's research and Professor Dr. Jeff Wade's early discussion probably would revise or challenge Professor Hansen's conclusion. But periodization probably also problematic. If Professor Zhang is kind to show his PowerPoint again. In page 71 or page 72, I found that Professor Zhang's periodization is based on century, half century or a whole century. It's tablets. Tab lines, page 71 or 72. Here we go. We found, 800 to 850, 850 to 900. And in page 2, he basically divided by century, 1100 to 1200, blah, 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 blah. So why? why divided by such kind of time span? I think it might be a bit arbitrary. You know, I'm not again a quantitative historian. I a little bit confused because we know that the key policies, projects, or decisions made by Imperial China do not follow such kind of periodization. For example, the most famous Longqing Kaiguan, the Ming Dynasty lifting its maritime ban, occurred in 1567. So this year or this event could not fit or find a appropriate place in the two tablets. And then I also wondering that in all kinds of Chinese ceramics discovered in West Indian Ocean, there was no mention of Zhangzhou porcelain, Zhangzhou killing. It was widely found in European museum and in Southeast Asia after 1567, the Longqing Kaiguan, when the Ming Dynasty lifted the maritime ban. So why nothing about the Zhangzhou porcelain in the Western Indian Ocean? Probably we missed some archaeological findings. Probably in the future we could have such kind of findings. And the second point is about space. Professor Zhang's research focused on West Indian Ocean. It's wonderful. As I said, I could not repeat it anymore. You know, it's the Indian Ocean. Indeed, was the furthest reach of Imperial China. When we talk about China's maritime activity or maritime knowledge, and later on it's the western part. So. So indeed, in my research, I spent a lot of time in research this part. And Hormuz is a very interesting case because even after the end of the Zheng He's voyage, you know, from 1405 to 1433, the Ming Dynasty reissued the maritime ban. All other Western Indian Ocean kingdoms, port cities, stop sending tributary missions to China, except for Hormuz. Probably in 1440s or 1450s, I don't remember exactly the year. According to Ming Shilu, the first kind of imperial archives, Hormuz sent its tributary mission to Beijing and asking, could we maintain our tributary relationship? I think the desire of Hormuz to maintain or even strengthen its connection with China, probably as Professor Zhang has pointed out, it is an island without a hinterland. So this kingdom really relied on its commercial connections, trade, including the trade with China. But again, I would again ask, you know, why not Bengal Bay? Why not eastern part of the Indian Ocean? You know, I'm sorry, it might be a little bit too much. And why not Southeast Asia? So if probably, you know, Professor Zhang has so many findings. So those findings based on your studies on the western part of Indian Ocean, do they match if we have any findings from Southeast Asia? Do they match those of Southeast Asia? Or would your findings revise, challenge any research findings based on Southeast Asia? And finally, materials or goods. Professor Zhang's talk certainly focused on ceramics, and this is understandable. And he also mentioned other goods indeed, such as aromatic materials, 香料, 香物, frankincense, which I mentioned, is just wonderful. But it also reminds us that Chinese sources, Chinese texture descriptions from Tang to Ming indeed provided relatively wealthy information about the Persian Gulf and Indian Ocean. We could combine archaeological findings, textual analysis, plus your quantitative research together. There were many other famous goods produced or traded from the Persian Gulf, such as horses, the animal. Hormuz indeed produced horses to the Ming Dynasty, and ambergris from the Indian Ocean, from the Maldives, from Julfar, indeed. So Julfar was also relatively mentioned in the Zheng He's voyages. And finally, in page 73, in your conclusion, you again, it's a wonderful conclusion. I have no idea, no oppositions. But in your last point, you mentioned that the Changsha killing was relatively low treating volume. Of course, Changsha killing was only probably exploded in the Tang Dynasty. But as I mentioned, the Bailey Dong shipwreck discovered in Indonesia, it consists of nearly 60,000 Changsha porcelain. And as scholars have agreed that this ship, we assumed its destination would be western part of Indian Ocean. So if the ship have made its return voyage and completed the voyage to the West Indian Ocean destination, would that challenge or revise your conclusion, your findings?
Yep.
So basically, that's my comments and questions, and those comments or questions, again, is based on me as a traditional historian who relies on textual analysis. And some questions and comments are not directly for Professor Zhang or his research, and even a little bit irrelevant. Again, let me congratulate you on your wonderful research, and I have been inspired. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Professor Yang. And Professor Zhang, would you like some time to respond to Professor Yang?
Yeah. So yeah, many thanks for Professor Yang, and I also seen a lot of some comments in the box. But yeah, about the research method, you say that it's like 50 years bins and spans for So this is one of the statistical method called heuristic analysis. We learned this from criminal study based on the safety and statistical study in London. Actually, by social science, they tested this method is valuable because we know that artifacts, they have different ranges of dating, some longer, some shorter. And so by this heuristic analysis, you can give the weight distribution, average weight distribution of the quantities to the bins you can give, for example, 100 years. Actually, with the heuristic in the criminal study, because they want to study the whole days, like a peak of a criminal event. So they use hours. So you can use hours as short. You can use minutes. You can use the years or even centuries. So based on your research aim. But this heuristic analysis, I think it's not all. As I said at the very beginning, that is a statistical method. We have discussion about its rationale and also about its limitation in our study in the paper. So probably you can see my paper. We have a section about methodology. We talk about that. But yes, again, that it will be very useful to have a statistical result. Even we don't think it's not perfect because I don't think any one methodology could be 100% perfect. But yes, I agree with you that this method has some limitations, but it's a rational one at the moment for archaeology. It's not only used for ceramic studies, but also for size, and we have a lot of discussion about that. And secondly, about the Zhangzhou wares, yes, we have, but small amount. We have Zhangzhou wares, like in South Iran, probably in Africa, and also in Julfar. Yes, we have a lot of Zhangzhou wares. The tricky point about Zhangzhou and Jingdezhen and Dehua porcelain is about they cannot be very well identified without seeing them. Even seeing them, like if we have the expert from Fujian or from Jingdezhen, it's really confusing for them as well, because many shards they have been broken to very tiny pieces. So we are not 100% they are sure about, like, yes, they are Zhangzhou or Jingdezhen. So in this case, we have three classes: Jingdezhen, Zhangzhou, and non-identified. So based on the knowledge. But yes, I think the answer will be very certain and sure that Zhangzhou, yes, we find out them. And you mentioned about the Southeast Asia, right? Yeah, this is my limitation. This is my study limitation. We have one of the PhD students, she's doing the East Indian Ocean. So in my study, in this presentation, no, we don't have the data from Southeast Asia. But I hope in the future we can have more data, and we can probably have a standardized understanding. So yeah, today this presentation, I call it a globalization, but actually it's only about China and the Western Indian Ocean. And Changsha wares, yes, this is a very good question. We have the same question. As you say that in Belitung shipwreck we have nearly 60,000 pieces, but on the side, yes, the number is really low. We call this Changsha or Belitung paradox. That we don't know how to answer it. Yeah. So probably it's the shipwreck. So in this study, we don't have shipwreck information, but we should have a lot of information from shipwrecks, but not included today. But yes, we believe that probably. I discussed this with different scholars, like Ollie Watson from Oxford. He studied Islamic pottery, and he said probably it's just a very special case. Just one boat with a huge number of changsha and also like blood white in the early type, but and then eventually they didn't make it. So yeah, so probably yeah, we don't know, but we call this a paradox. Sorry, it's not good answer, but we have the same question. Yeah. Yeah, there's all the question from you.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah,
thank
yeah,
you.
yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you both. And we actually have quite a few questions coming in, and maybe we do not have enough time to address all of them, but we will collect all of them and send all of them to you after the webinar. But we can select several questions, I guess, maybe. So first, a question is raised by Professor He Weiwei, and he asked that he saw a lot of ceramics in Zimbabwe, and when and why these ceramics came to southern part of Africa.
Yeah, so yes, clearly Zimbabwe is one of the center in terms of Chinese ceramic trade, especially after the I think 15th century, clearly, and formed to a center of trade at that time. The reason for the Chinese ceramic imports into the local places probably based on two reasons. One is based on the involvement of Zimbabwe, Great Zimbabwe, into the whole Indian Ocean trade with Islamic context. Because we say Arab merchants, they were leading the Indian Ocean trade at that time. So with the involvement, engagement from South Africa to the whole Indian Ocean, we can see they have been involved into this trade network. There's one thing that is a background. Is not we don't think it's like a preference that they are interested in Chinese ceramics. They just get contact with the Islamic merchants and get the goods from Islamic merchant trade, and with their local like a gold and luxury item trade. And another thing is about the local culture that they use. Yeah, they have long distance globalized items. They use different types of resources like a copper, different types of materials, glasses, for example. So they have some beliefs in locally. For example, red stained glass, the color is the same to blood. So they believe this a kind of religion or ideological understanding about the materials. For Chinese ceramics, they probably use Chinese ceramic to honor the identities of the rulers of the local communities. Yeah, so quite special. And we believe that the cases of Chinese ceramics used in different parts of the world have different backgrounds. So this is why I want to talk about the Hormuz Kingdom case. And you can see this is the background for the Hormuz Kingdom, but not for Africa. So in Africa, we should have a different background. Yeah.
Yeah, and another question from Professor Sarah Watt. And she asked that there was a lot of discussion of exchange, but exchange requires reciprocation, not a unilateral direction flow of objects or one directional influence. And I didn't see any evidence that in your presentation. And so do you have any evidence of exchange? Yeah.
Yeah, we should have. So as I mentioned on the trading list, so pottery is not on the list, and the Chinese ceramics even not on the list. So it means that Chinese ceramics is just small amount, and probably pottery just a small amount of the trade. So actually, for the massive, on the pyramid, the lower part of the pyramid should be, as you said, the two-direction trade, but they are not probably available in history or archaeology massively. But I agree 100% that the trade network was really complicated and should be two directions. I'm sorry that I gave a quite biased background today. Yeah. So yes, I agree with you that it should be two ways. But if we say Chinese ceramics, because ceramics are quite special and produced in China and exported to the other places, we have no needs of other potteries inside of China. But yes, as we can see from the evidence, we have coins, we have glasses, we have incense, for example. They are in small numbers. The fabrics, they are imported to China, but they are in small numbers, not survived in archaeology, and not well described massively in history. So it's probably this why that we cannot see a clear two-direction trade. But I believe the trade should be a network and two directions. Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe final two related questions from Professor Stephen Morgan, and one is on the definition you use on the of globalization, and to what extent can the intensity of trade in ceramics, as measured by residual shards, substitute for the lack of price data, or be used as an alternative metric in considering whether we are seeing globalization as economists and economic historians. And also the final questions on, are there any data of employment directly in ceramic production and indirectly in transporting it to into ports on vessels and loading on vessels? Yeah, maybe Professor Zhang, you could just very briefly address the two questions. Yeah, thank you.
I think, yes, this is a really valid question and really important because the concept of globalization. And this is why I call this archaic globalization, early globalization. It's not really the real globalization we have today. And the key thing also is the limitation of the archaeological data or even history, that we don't have a consistent price record. And in archaeology, it's impossible at the moment to know the prices or precise prices of commodities. For example, the changsha wares and the luxury yue wares. We have some archaeological inscription to say that a few coins for a bowl like changsha in Tang Dynasty, but 1,000 coins for a yue ware. But we just know the relative values of them, that the changsha is much lower price than the others. And we know that in modern economic studies, price is the key to study money, to measure the values. Is the key. But we feel really sorry, but we don't have consistent prices records And probably the earliest or some of good price records from the archives made by the Indian Ocean Company. And also we can see some missionaries, living in China, US missionaries, who were living in China, and they recorded some prices of Chinese ceramics. But again, those records, they are not probably massively and not precise or not consistent. Yeah, but I agree with you that it's really tricky, and it's quite dangerous to think about globalization without a good definition. And yeah, I think there's one thing I really want to learn from you, the professors in history or from economics, because in archaeology we don't know how to deal with the data like that, and probably we can develop a method or understanding in the future about like how can we match the data and the methodology from different disciplines. Yeah.
Thank you very much, and also thank you to Professor Yang and Professor Chen for addressing some of the questions in the panelists, and also, so that brings, I think that brings us to the end of today's seminar. So thank you very much, Professor Zhang, and also thank you very much, Professor Yang. And I also like to thank you all of you in the audience that very actively participate in our today's discussion, and thank you very much. And also, before we conclude, please, I'd like to invite all of you to join us for our next webinar on the April 17th. It's also a webinar on the archaeological studies. So if any of you are very interested in archaeology, please join us again. And so thank you very much, everyone, and see you next time. Thank you. See you.
谢谢张老师
Thank
谢谢
you.
常老师，谢谢胡老师。
Thank you.
谢谢常老师，谢谢杨老师，谢谢胡老师。
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.